in listen-only mode.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the GA Learning webinars hosted by us at sportswebinars.com. My name is Nicholas Walsh. I'm coming live from Sydney. I'm currently joined on the line by presenter Jason Ryan, current Kildare Senior Football Manager, who's taken time out of his schedule this evening to present on the topic which continues to evolve in all facets of team sports right throughout the world, team play. Jason tonight is going to concentrate on team playing Gaelic football, and indeed this is the first of our two webinars that we're going to be hosting over the next few days via the GA Learning platform. On Saturday morning we are joined by Paddy Butler at 10 a.m. He's going to concentrate solely on the greater coordination and the key elements behind coordination and how that is linked to the beautiful game of hurling. As mentioned, I've got Jason on the line. I'll hand you over to Jason now in about 2 seconds. Just before that, just a couple of little housekeeping issues. Jason's going to present. Jason will run through his platform or his presentation, roughly around 40-45 minutes, he believes. Throughout the presentation, guys, you will see that you will have a question box down your screen. All you have to do is type into your questions, and then I will take your questions after the event has occurred. So if you find a question along the way, just type in your question in the box. I'll be able to read the question, I'll note the question, and then when Jason's finished the event, we go through all the questions with Jason on that. Hopefully it's fairly straightforward, guys. The platform has been hopefully easy to get into this evening. We've got about 38 GA coaches online at present, so thanks for your registration, and also thanks to Jimmy Darcy back at HQ in Croke Park for his patience over the last few days when we were trying to set this up. As mentioned, there's going to be a recording available as well, so the recording will be made available to everyone via the GA Learning platform, via Jimmy and his staff in Croke Park. So without further ado, Jason, I'll hand it over to you and we'll get it going.
Good evening, Nicholas. Good evening, everybody else. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to have this talk this evening. My focus is on team playing Gaelic football. Just to give you a little bit of a background as to where I'm coming from or what experience I have. I am a qualified PE teacher. A big part of my job in the school I work in Dungarvan and West Waterford is coordinating a coaching course, or a sport exercise and coaching course, where I deal with adult coaches from 17 to, and I suppose the oldest coach that I've had is 57 years old. I've been coaching teams since the mid-90s, a variety of different sports. It's not really until 2007 that I had an opportunity to coach a Gaelic football team. And at the end of 2007, I got involved with the Wexford senior football team, and have been involved in senior county football since then. So very lucky to have done that. I suppose from the outset, just to point out that what I am going to be talking about is about my experiences, both positive and negative, rather than maybe purely from an academic side. I am not an academic. I'm not studying for a PhD at the moment, so I will use references to various papers that I've read or articles that I've come across, but a lot of it is more about experience, opinions. Some of it is subjective, and some of the items that I'll be talking about are, they are objective. Like there is research behind them, so it's not just something that I've plucked out of the sky. With regard to my own desire to gain knowledge, I go on courses, I visit groups, visit teams, and initially I suppose a lot of what I would have been interested in is the technicalities of coaching. The tactics, the type of practices and drills and activities, but over time my opinions have changed. They've changed as to what is the most important thing with regard to a coach, and that is the direction that this talk is going to be really going, or this presentation is going to be going in. Alex Ferguson, whether you like him, hate him, or whatever it might be, he is somebody that has been incredibly successful for over 20 years at Manchester United, and this is my starting point, that he's talking about the role as a sports manager, but he's referring it back to being a teacher. So the job of a manager like that of a teacher is to inspire people to be better. So various articles that I refer to during the course of this are education, they are teaching specific, but I would be of the opinion that if something works in a classroom setting, why can it not transfer onto a training field or into a gym or whatever environment that we actually have our players. While the focus of this talk will be about youth in GAA, there will be references to young kids, and there will also be references to adults. And I also believe that there is a huge transfer regardless of what age group that you're actually coaching or who you're actually dealing with. When we look at a coach or we come across a coach, whether as a player or as a parent or a spectator, we see what's on the outside. The same as with a clock. You see the front of the clock, you see its face, but what goes on behind it? You see the arms moving, but what are the workings? And when we are looking at the workings of a clock, it can be very, very complicated. And if you were asked to put them together, what would you pick? What are the important cogs? What are the important wheels? What goes with what? How do they actually move? And what is their places? And I think that's really sums up coaching, that there's so many different aspects to it, like what is important and what needs to be where. And that two coaches can have exactly the same qualities and parts and people skills and whatnot, but both of them maybe have a totally different manner, and maybe both of them have two totally different pathways regarding one being successful and one not, due to just small little tweaks and small little changes. So it's just something to kind of be aware of, that we all have the tools to be good quality coaches. It's just how we necessarily use those tools is the most important thing. And when Alex Ferguson talks about inspiring people, for all of us in coaching, our eventual aim is to create a situation whereby we have players that when they cross the white line, they're able to perform. They're able to play in a game, whatever it might be, in camogie or football or hurling or whatnot, but that at the end of the game they're able to finish and look back and think, yes, I performed as well as I wanted, or if the aim for that game was to improve on how they played the previous day, that was achieved both individually and also as a collective. And that is really where it's at, to try to create that situation whereby they cross the white line and they are able to perform. They're not reliant on people on the sideline or people in the stand, that they have the preparation done. So for us as coaches, we've got to empower the players to be in that position. At this moment in time, where are we? So quote here from Niall Moyna. It's from a Go Games article. So within the GA, we nurture the best and neglect the rest. Training competition is geared for outcome and not the process of development. Now that's not from me, it's from Niall. Niall, it's something that he believes in, and in the research that he's done, that the elite players are better players on our teams, that they get a lot of attention, whereas the people that are in the middle of the road maybe don't get as much, and the people that maybe are struggling can sometimes really get left behind in more ways than one. I suppose a little bit of solace with that is that it's not just us. So if different journals, papers and different articles in other countries showed as well. And here's one from the Australian Sports Commission, where just in red here, there's high praise for the best performance and little acknowledgement of others. So, it's not just an Irish situation, it's not just a GA situation. This is something worldwide, that the elite performers, your better players on your team, that they get an awful lot of our attention. In the classroom setting, I have the same situation with my colleagues, that we would often find that a lot of our attention is given to the ones that cause the most amount of trouble, and that other people get left behind. And from a coaching situation, we have to be aware of who are we putting our time into, which players are we investing our time into, and is it even? Is there any sort of a balance in what we're actually doing? An issue that we have to be aware of right through this talk, and to try to think how we can do something about it, is dropout in sport in general for young people, but also in Gaelic games. And at Gaelic games at a young age, we have very similar participation rates to soccer, but into the 20s that number really drops. A lot of the number in soccer holds much better, but the number that continue to participate in GA drops. And that's something that we've got to be aware of. And I suppose, do we as coaches, what responsibility do we have? Is there something that we are doing, or is there something that we're not doing that's actually affecting these numbers? With regard to what we are doing at the moment in this country, we're probably not as regimental as the picture in the bottom left-hand corner, where we just have mass participation in exactly the same activity, nor are we maybe as cruel as the photo in the top right-hand corner. And in a lot of cases, we might not quite have the Alex Ferguson hairdryer treatment of the American football coach. But we do have some situations maybe that are not quite ideal. Now, to reiterate my main objective over the next 32, 33 minutes, that is to look at the actual process of coaching. So instead of maybe looking at this is an excellent drill to improve ability to pick up breaking ball in the middle of the field from puckouts or from kickouts, I feel that there's so many courses, seminars, presentations that deal with that, but there's not a huge amount of them out there that actually look at the skills of coaching, the actual process of coaching as an individual, how you prepare yourself to face a group of athletes and to facilitate them, to get them into a situation whereby they can cross that white line and perform on the pitch. This slide is exactly the same as the last one. It sets out my main objectives. Exactly the same words are on the page, but the only difference is the order that they're in. So I suppose the question that I'll come back to is, how often do we presume that our athletes understand what it is we're saying? How often do we presume our athletes take on board the words, the pictures, the numbers, the message that we passed on? Do we take it for granted sometimes? And I would say, undoubtedly for myself, on many occasions I've taken it for granted, and later on in the game, week, season, year, whatever it might be, we'll then find out that that message actually didn't really that the players didn't really take it. So it's about the manner that is presented to them. With regard to the players that we used to deal with, Mario Balotelli, a lot of you are going to be familiar with, regardless of where he's gone, he's caused problems. You've seen a photograph here. All the rest of the players are doing a plank, isometric contraction, they are a core exercise, whichever way you want to look upon it, but Mario feels that he doesn't need to do it. That we all have players that are similar to Mario that maybe aren't as motivated and whatnot. So they are a challenge for us. So that's at one end of the spectrum. And I suppose the other end of the spectrum is, your highly motivated players. Hopefully those of you can hear this, anybody who can't, I'll speak about it.
I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed.
For those of you maybe that couldn't see that, it was a video clip of Michael Jordan. And while Mario's at one end of the spectrum, you have the likes of Michael Jordan at the other end of the spectrum, a person that is incredibly motivated, very, very focused, has absolutely outstanding knowledge of his role and just believes in himself. So despite the fact that he misses shots, misses efforts, he kept on coming back over and over and over again to try to execute the most difficult part of the game. So he had absolute belief. So we as coaches, we can't afford to focus just on Michael or on Mario, nor the people that are in between. It's the whole group, and that is a challenge. So I'm not trying to suggest that it's all easy. It is a challenge, regardless of whether it's kids, youths, or adults. Well, undoubtedly Albert Einstein was a genius. I still question this. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Like, my issue with it is to find the word simple. That so often at games, so often at training sessions, right through from young kids to adults, I hear coaches and parents and players shouting, how many times do I have to tell you? How many times did I tell you that? So does that mean that the message wasn't passed simply enough? But does that mean that the person in the first place didn't really understand what they were the message they were trying to get out? And I think the people understand the message they're trying to get out. It's just at times we say things how we ourselves would like it to be said to us, or we do things the way that we found it was useful for us to do it, but we don't necessarily think often enough about the people we're saying it to. What is going to make it easy for these kids, these teenagers, or these adults to understand the message that I'm trying to get across? What understanding am I trying to give them, and how am I going about doing that? Like, we have a great start from young age with kids in sport. This is a photograph of my daughter's sports day last year. 100% participation, parents delighted, kids delighted, regardless of whether they came first, in the middle, or whether they came towards the latter. It didn't matter. They all had a wonderful experience. They all really enjoyed it. And as the years go by, this continues for a period of time. There's a photograph from a sports camp last year. Huge numbers of kids, all enthusiastic, really, really, really enjoying their sport and their activity. And this is where it all starts, that they have a positive experience of sport and activities. But what leads to the dropout? Why is there something that we as coaches are missing? Is there something that we've done, or something that we continue to do, or is there something that we neglect to do that's causing these kids to maybe drop out? I'm going to move slightly away now and look a little bit at successful sports teams and try to relate it back to our youths, back to our kids, and to maybe our club players, and try to think, is there something that's in successful sports teams that we can copy? I've been lucky over the last number of years that my involvement in both in Wexford and Kildare has allowed me to maybe make phone calls to people, and has opened doors to spend time observing and watching what elite coaches are actually doing in the country of Ireland. All of the sports, whichever the code, whichever activity, skills levels are very, very high. Take that as a given. As are tactics, very astute. Physical preparation is always outstanding. Mental strength is outstanding. And this decision making is important, regardless of what sporting setting it is. But something I suppose I didn't really think about is innovation. And even when I did start thinking about it, what I thought about was individual sports. So Fosbury here on the left-hand side, coming up with a new high jump technique. Prior to that was a scissors kick and whatnot, and all of a sudden he came up with a new technique, and now everybody that does high jump worldwide, that's the technique they use. Or we've Graham O'Brien, where he designed a bike, changed the body position, thought about aerodynamics. He was rather innovative in everything that he did. But I suppose what I'm looking at is instead of it just being individual, I'm realizing that there's so much innovation in groups and teams. We've Rinus Michels here, the Dutch manager in the 1970s, and again he came back in 1988 when Holland won the European Championships, and he's the guy that introduced total football, where positions, roles, they were totally interchangeable, which was absolutely, was a huge progression in how the game of soccer was played, away from rigid positions. And in Ireland we've had that, I suppose. In the 1970s, you had Kerry with Mick O'Dwyer changing the game and introducing so much hand passing. And in the last number of years, Donegal have been absolute, trailblazers in coming up with a slightly different way of playing, maximising their talents, being innovative in their setups, in their defensive play, in their offensive play. And whether you enjoy watching it or not, you have to be really, really impressed with the innovation of Jim McGuinness and his management team on how they've come up with ways of playing. The area that stood out above these six, and I suppose I expected it going into sports teams and environments, but it really stood out from the very, very start, was positive relationships. I'm talking about people skills here, how the coaches interact, how the players interact, how everybody how to communicate with each other, and that's really, really important. So that for me stands out more than the rest. I suppose an individual that the media would portray as being very successful no doubt in how his teams perform, but also in how he interacts with his players, is Jose Mourinho. Very charismatic, very animated, but I would also say very calculating. I would say that his shows of affection, his shows of camaraderie with his players are very, very calculated. He's doing it to show them what they feel to him. He's doing it to improve how they work with each other, so that the days that he needs them to give him that little bit, the days that he's trying to motivate them, the days that he wants them to really believe in what the message he's trying to say to them, that all the work he has done in building up that relationship will pay off. And other individuals like Joe Schmidt, Joe, from the stories that I've heard, he believed in he believes in getting the players to respect each other and whatnot. But one thing that he introduced into the Leinster setup was that when players arrived at training, that they were to shake hands. They met the groundsman, they were to shake hands with them. If they met the people that were cooking their dinners in the canteen, shake their hands. Coaches shake hands with players, and every day, every single person acknowledges every other member of the staff. The idea of breaking down barriers, the idea of improving communication, that I suppose if you're comfortable communicating with somebody off the pitch, it's going to make that much bit easier to communicate when you're on the pitch. How often do we have a situation whereby the players are rushing to come to training, they get through the training session, and then they rush to get home again. So for your youths and your kids, they're rushing to get to training, mum, come on, I need a lift, or they're rushing to cycle to training, and after training then their parents are waiting for them saying, come on, I have to go and collect your brother or your sister, we're in a rush to leave. So how much actual interaction takes place? Like, that's very much the case at Intercounty as well. How much time do the players really interact with each other? What tactics can coaches come up with to try to improve the communication and the camaraderie between groups? I was lucky enough to witness Billy Walsh at first hand with his boxers, and what an incredible success they've had. Billy's communication with his boxers is very simple, very concise, very specific, and he is consistent with his boxers. But he has a really positive relationship with them. They work hard for each other, with each other, and so it's a real element of togetherness. They celebrate their success together. So, regardless of the sport, whether it's an individual sport or team sport, there is so much that we can take from it into our actual sport and our wonderful games in the GAA. Now, there's another side to this, and that's what maybe can happen if relationships break down. Phil Brown was manager of Hull City. He was really successful. He had a number of seasons where Hull City were promoted, and eventually he led them into the Premiership. Their budget was relatively small, and their facilities and whatnot were maybe substandard, but with time, as they made their way to the Premiership and as money was coming in, things improved. But after a very poor first half, he decided to keep his players on the pitch at half time, and he chastised them, and he really went to town on the players, and you can see him there wagging his finger and whatnot in the photograph. Now, results didn't go too pear-shaped initially, but over time in the season, things went disastrous. Phil himself was sacked, the team were relegated, and they have never gotten, well, I suppose they're back in the Premiership now, but it took a number of years for them to get back to where they were at. And I would question, on that one day, what damage did he actually do to the relationship that he had with the players? Prior to that, he had a very positive relationship. That one day alone, could that have caused an issue? And that the positive relationship all of a sudden disappeared, and they just had a working relationship. And to be honest, a working relationship can be positive, but you know what? The better we can get on with our players, the more comfortable they are talking to us and working with us, whatever age they are, is definitely going to be a healthier environment to have. I suppose it's very simple as talking about positive relationships, and we can say it over and over again, but what are they and how can we create them, and what can we do as coaches? What can be done with a 5-year-old or with a 55-year-old or with one of the boys in your team or one of the women on your team? What can actually be done? What's commonplace? These are 4 things that I believe. So I suppose this is coming from my experience over the last number of years. You read different articles, journals, and people that will say it slightly differently or may have maybe different takes on it. So if I say something that contradicts some of your beliefs, I apologize in advance, but what I'm trying to do here is just to give you ideas of things that I feel have worked for me in the past, and also things that didn't work for me, and when I reflected on it, maybe if I tweaked it in a certain way, it could have improved. And when I tried to do that the following season, I've had an opportunity to see it actually improve. First thing that I'm going to talk about is communication, and this is just so open-ended. It's just massive. A lot of the time we presume communication is just the words that we say, but there's so much more. It's only the tip of the iceberg, really, that we as individuals can put time into preparing speeches. But when you look at someone like Obama when he makes a speech, you take on the words, but his facial expressions, his use of his hands, there's so much else that goes in it. His calculation in his pauses when he speaks, how calculated is in the tones that he uses. There's so much more than just words. and it's taking that on board and being aware of it, and acknowledging that it's more than just words. From a research point of view, this is one individual's research that they felt that communication is made up of the smallest portion in green here in words, and then a huge 55%. The largest amount of communication was dictated by body language, and voice and tone were a huge 38%. So without saying any words, the other two are huge, absolutely massive. Now for some individuals, without the words, nothing else is going to happen. But words help, and body language really then allows us to highlight the importance of maybe the key words that we have to get out or get across to our athletes, our performers. With regard to body language, what effect does it have on people? And I suppose if you flick through any channels late at night, and you come across a number of channels that have poker, so professional gamblers, and what amazes me and when I started looking at it first was the clothing that they're wearing. So you have guys wearing sunglasses and bandanas and hats and trying to cover up, and I'll flick it on to look at it just to try to see how they're trying to read each other, what kind of facial expressions, and some of them will wear nothing at all regarding covering up their facial expressions. And it's interesting to see, do they have any tells, do they have any signs? And we absolutely do. I was trying to find photographs that I suppose wouldn't be offensive, since I spoke to Nick about this talk and to Jimmy Darcy, and I'm using a number of photographs of my students and different things. This is Chris, one of my students. He's doing a one-year coaching course. We spend 1 day a week in local primary schools dealing with different sporting activities, and this is a photograph from last week. Last Thursday he was coaching cycle and road safety in a mixed education primary school, and just by looking at him you can see he's happy, the kids look happy. We've no doubt that he had a successful session. The kids went home happy. The kids left that session in a really positive frame of mind. And the start of our sessions and the end of our sessions, they're our two most important times with regard to the message that we're giving to our kids, our youth, or our adults. They're the parts that set the tone for the session, or they're the parts that give them the message that we want them going home with. And here's Daniel. This is from last week as well. He was in a school teaching spike ball, a developmental game for volleyball. And I suppose from Daniel's body language, leaning against the post, it's really not ideal that, it's not an ideal, the way he is. Like, what message is he getting to the kids? Is he looking enthusiastic? And I would question that he needs to really move away from where he's at. And even the clothing that he's wearing, Chris looks so much more professional in his clothing compared to Daniel. So Chris is his matching clothes. Daniel should have, but on this day, Daniel wasn't prepared as well as he could. So what message is he giving across to the kids? I'm going to show you two photographs. Last number of years, Dublin have been incredibly successful, particularly in Leinster, winning so many provincial titles in a row. But I'm not trying to cause any controversy with these two photographs. But these two photographs that are taken during the national anthem. It is a Leinster final photograph. Dublin players upright, looking focused, and in a lot of cases very, very relaxed. So just right across the board, there's not too many of them there to think, wow, what is their state of mind? They seem to be really focused in on what they need to do. But this is the opposition. This was the Wexford team that I was managing, and the difference in the body language of the two teams is there's a huge contrast. Dublin did go on to win, and I'm not suggesting that just because the guys were standing like this meant that they were going to lose the game, but I suppose the message that I'm trying to say is that one looks relaxed, focused, and the other, you've at least 50% of the players that look rather on edge, and that can't have helped their performance. Now, it was a very, very close game, and there was only a few points in it in the end, but the body language does give a very strong message out there. To continue on with the body language kind of theme, Brendan Rodgers, regardless of how Liverpool are doing this year, he had a very successful stint at Swansea and was incredibly successful last year with Liverpool. He talks a really good game, very interesting to listen to, and if any of you have an opportunity to watch him coaching on YouTube, it's very, very interesting. Just the way that he speaks, how he conducts himself. He, again, just like Jose Mourinho, is very, very, very calculated in what he's doing. And there was a paper written by the FA looking at Brendan, how he spoke, what he was doing, at his relationships and so on and so on. And one of the things that came back from it was that when he was speaking to a player, he imagined that they had a post-it note on their forehead and it said, "You are important to me." And the message, I suppose what I would have taken from that, the message I get from that is that when I would speak to somebody that I really care about, I believe that I speak to them in a warmer manner, that I'm more relaxed with them, and that I am closer to them in a conversation. And I suppose Brendan, by imagining that that person is important to them, that straight away he's improving that bond, that link, that ability to communicate with that person. This is a quote or a piece that I picked up online a couple of years ago, and I've used it with different groups when I've spoken to them. Be positive, have the right attitude, praise that's well timed and appropriate is essential to your something or other progress. Praise is cheap and free, so use it often. You don't have to overdo it, but you do need to let your something or other know you're proud of them. And the question that I would ask, or that I do ask people when I show them this, is that, where do you think this is from? Is it a coaching book or manual? Is it a teaching book or manual? And what is it? And inevitably people will, or all the time people say it's something to do with education, but they'll always refer to people. But where it actually comes from is a website teaching people how to train, coach, and box their dogs. So that's the manner in which they're suggesting that if you want to train a dog, you have the right attitude. You praise them at the right time. Praise is cheap, use it often. You don't have to overdo it. How often are we that calculated with our players? Do we really think about when and how and what we actually say to our players? Who gets the attention? Back to Alex Ferguson again. It's gas. I suppose we have this impression of him with the hairdryer treatment and whatnot. And no one likes being criticised. Few people get better with criticism. Most respond to encouragement instead. So I try to give encouragement when I could. I think that's great, and it gives a whole different insight to Alex Ferguson. But in red here, there is nothing better than hearing "well done." Those are the two best words invented. Now, this is a guy that was at the top of his game for over 20 years at Manchester United. He also managed the Scottish national team in the '86 World Cup, and he also was very successful with Aberdeen prior to his time with Manchester United. So this is a guy that really has thought about how things need to be done. He's had time to reflect. He's had resources and money to think over it. And here he is just talking about "well done." Now, I'll question it. I think "well done" as a blanket statement is not as beneficial as "well done, that was a good kick pass." If you want people to get better at kick passing, you need to praise them for kick passing the ball better. There's no sense in praising somebody for hand passing if you really wanted them to kick past the ball. You need to put thought into the type of language you use and when you actually use it. That you're not going to give a dog biscuit if they wag their tail, whereas what you want them to do is actually to sit down. With regard to what to say in coaching, we need to reflect on how we want people to play. What's our philosophy? So when we are giving our coaching points that are built around our key performance indicators, what are the key performance indicators to the philosophy of our team? Do we want our players kick passing? Do we want our goalkeepers kicking the ball out fast, slow? What are we prioritising? And if we don't know that, we're really just, we're really guessing. We're guessing the message we're going to get across to the players. The clarity in the message that we're getting across to the players is vital. Using words, using pictures, drawing things, writing things, and using video. Regardless of our budgets, they're all doable. There are very often people say, "I don't have the budget to do this, I don't have the budget to do that." With modern technology now, smartphones, we can do so much more, and it's making use out of it. It's putting aside the time and being calculated enough in what we need to do rather than maybe saying we can't. I would have contacted Keith Barry a number of years ago and asked him to help me out in different ways, and initially he was positive, but then with time it turned out that it just wasn't going to work, and the individual that he passed me on to was a guy called Joe Hoey who trained him, and Joe would have Joe would have been Keith's hypnosis trainer, and Joe would also deal an awful lot in linguistics. And two things that he's asked me to kind of take on board and really try to use with the players is stop them from saying the word "but." And a simple thing that if a player says "but," they're disagreeing with everything you've said and weren't really listening in the first place. So it's back to the fact. Our communication is not just about talking, it's about listening. How often do the players really listen, and do we actually test to find out, have they listened? Do we ask them to repeat what we just said? Do we ask them to explain it? Do we ask them to give team talks? Do we ask them to explain the tactics that we're looking for? Do we ask them to explain what our game plan is? And the other phrase is "yeah, yeah." Joe was absolutely adamant, we need to cut it out. If we're speaking and somebody's going, yeah, 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 that means they're not really listening. They just are waiting for us to finish, and they're waiting for their piece to be taken on board. So it's us challenging the players to find out, are they really listening? In an education setting in schools, the way challenging is by examining them, by assessment, and can we do that in team games? Absolutely, we can. Absolutely, but it's about being creative in how we do it. With regard to a little more depth in our language, and we're still dealing with communication here, I suppose phrases-wise, you must or you should has often been used by coaches. And even if we think about ourselves, there's probably stages that we would use those phrases. Birmingham University conducted a huge study. The findings came out in 2013, and it was based around soccer coaching. But they asked the coaches to move from you must or you should and change to have you thought about and why don't you try. And the results they got out of it were just phenomenal. They found that the coaches that changed the way they spoke were getting higher levels of performance out of the performers, better player retention, less dropout. There was huge, huge, huge changes, and the coaches found it far more rewarding. And I suppose simple ones for us to even think about is, do we say don't give the ball away? Or could we just say keep possession? Now what I want you to do is, now what I don't want you to do is, maybe when a sub is going and saying, I don't want you to do this and I don't want you to, can we be a bit more positive? What I want you to do is this, that or the other. That's, I suppose, all coach to player communication. But on the field, our level of communication, Leinster under Michael Cheika introduced the phrase next ball. So it took away any confrontation. Somebody made a mistake, the call was next ball. Somebody did something well, the call was next ball. And it kept people focused on the most important thing, which was the next ball, and everybody working to try to do the best that they possibly could with the next ball. The second key thing for me on top of communication is observation. Like, this is a lot more straightforward. I suppose there's not as many aspects to it. You need to get to know your players, have an idea of their personality, their background, and what actually makes them tick. And the only way of being able to do that is spending time with them. John Hattie was involved in a huge study that involved millions, from an education point of view, involved millions of students worldwide. And he's a New Zealander, but he basically brought lots of different studies and findings together. And one of the key parts he felt from an educationist was that a teacher needs to evaluate their effect on their students, evaluate how effective you are with your students. And again, that came back to assessment, that if we can come up with means of assessing our impact, then we know what's working and we continue it, and we know what's not working and we can discontinue it and change. My third area is planning and preparation. I know we're really keen talking about failure to prepares, preparing to fail from Benjamin Franklin, but from a fitness point of view, we talk about our principles of training, which help an awful lot with our structuring the training session. From a physical point of view, specificity, overload, progression, interference, and reversibility. And I would question that these can be very, very beneficial in a skills, tactics session. It can be beneficial with a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old. But we do have issues. So we've some coaches that'll come along, and I experienced it. I had a coach said, "Look, I won All-Ireland. Just do as I said, and we'll win." We're doing a speed work session tonight, lads. We're doing 10 laps. We'll sprint the widths, jog the lengths, and that's our speed session. Or a coach at Rami wanted me to structure some training sessions, and he said, look, the only condition is I need him to run for 30 minutes every night, hard running. Or a lecturer in Santa College said, when he was introducing or meeting the students, said, look, well, so you've coached for 10 years. Have you coached for 10 years, or have you done the same thing for 10 years in a row? Do we really observe? Do we really evaluate what we actually do? A lot of what we do is kind of bandwagon effect. Luke said sport obviously makes us run faster and gives us more energy because a TV ad tells us it does. Like, what evidence do we really have? And I suppose, between bandwagon effect and herding instinct, the whole idea of such and such team won the All-Ireland, that's the best way to play. We've all got to play that way. And that's not really the case. That shouldn't be the case. We should have a philosophy, believe in it, follow it through, and adapt it. With regard to the preparation, are we specific in our training? Is the training we're doing age appropriate? Are we looking at, are we in the training to train phase? With Kildare at the moment, this is our first week in collective training, so we are in a training to train phase. Yeah, we eventually want to be training to win, but we're not there yet. We are in training to train phase. And it's understanding where we're at. We need to differentiate our training sessions. Are we doing activities that are ability appropriate? Are we actually in some training sessions differentiating and having different players doing slightly different practices, because that will give them success in that area and make them feel good about themselves. And if they feel good about themselves, they want to do it more and more. The Irish boxers, prior to going to the Olympics, the London Olympics, to train in the Curragh, now the Irish boxers are doing it, so definitely everybody should be doing it. But really, is it appropriate to your particular sport? Do you know why the Irish boxers are doing it? You know, so while they were doing it as a team building activity, our team's doing that as physical preparation for a hurling season, for a Gaelic football season, and is that really, really beneficial? So we've got to think about that, and we've got to organise and prepare ourselves. So absolutely plan, absolutely evaluate, and observation is so, so key. They do take time, and it's back to the iceberg. Maybe the tip of the iceberg is our training sessions. It's what's underneath the iceberg. That's all the hard work that goes in behind the scenes, and we've got to be able to put it in. With regard to believing in what we need to do from a Barcelona point of view, you know, their aim is to help young players understand the game. We want the players to learn how to think fast. We want them to learn how to run little but run smart. And they begin their physical preparation at 16. Fitness training doesn't start till then. Prior to that, it's ball, 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 ball. Ball competency, make them comfortable. Develop their agility and their speed with a ball, and then look at developing specific fitness. They believe in that. That's their philosophy, and they follow through. Whether they have a good season or a bad season, they follow through what they really believe in. This is a short training session. I'll allow you to look at it. For those of you that can see it, great. For those that don't, I'll have a quick chat to maybe describe one or two aspects of it in a couple of seconds. The session there was with Aidan O'Connell, one of the Munster strength and conditioning coaches, was on in the Institute of Technology in Cork in their training centre. With regard to preparation, organisation, planning, it's fabulous. You know, the organisation of the cones, the practices, it all flows. He knows exactly what it is that he's doing. His use of language, he knows the words that he needs to use. He has the attention of the players. For me, it ticks so many boxes. It's appropriate to the phase of the training they're in. This is midweek prior to they had a league game at the weekend, so they're travelling to Italy, so this was preparation for that, so a little bit of a reaction and speed work, but really outstanding in his organisation, his planning and his preparation. Simple, but really good. I think we also have to acknowledge, you know, who knows best, who is the person that's really in charge. We need to listen to our youths, our kids, our adults, but you know, there has to be a balance between what's needed to be done and what the actual players actually want to do. Because if the players have their way, they'll want to play games all the time. They love them. You know, the question is, when can we play games? But we have to get the balance right, that a lot of training sessions can be technique-centred. We do need more game-centred and game-sense activities. But by having those, what the great opportunity gives us as coaches first to be a facilitator, to guide the athletes as opposed to telling them what to do. So it's to guide them through games into what we want, what we would really like them to do. And these games, you know, and again, this is the research that was done by University of Birmingham. Again, by playing games, to give the players a sense of belongingness, and it really promoted their competency within the sport and the activity, and helped to continue participation. And from our own sport, Eamon McGee a year ago made this comment: I love playing football, but I prefer if I just had to turn up on a Sunday. I don't like the other stipulations. He loves playing games. The reason our kids like playing hurling and Gaelic football is they love playing games. They don't necessarily like the training, but they love the games. And I question why we don't play more games in training. For some coaches, they said to me, "Look, we just can't get fit enough playing games, or we don't have enough players, and I want to run them." But like research has shown us, Kieran Collins in Tala IT, Carl Craig from DCU, they have really good pieces of research that show that games and modified small-sided games allow us to make huge improvements in aerobic capacity, power, speed, agility, that are comparable and in fact better than aerobic training or other specifics that can help. So games, don't underestimate them and how much they can help us as coaches. Go Games are promoting them big time, so you know, drive on, get games done. The fourth scenario I'm going to speak about is the environment. Often we can get maybe obsessed with the bad apple and our equipment and facilities, are they good enough, and this team have better and whatnot. But the reality is that you can have my kids. If I go to Ulster Bank, the kids don't want to go in with me. Whereas if I go to a credit union, the kids will come in. But the only reason is that the credit union, there's toys, whereas in Ulster Bank there's not. Like, that's only one thing. The buildings are similar and all the rest of it, but it's having the toys, it's making it a bit more child friendly. And when you look at research as to why kids take part in sport, and this is the same for adults, it's due to fun, 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 fun. Regardless of what country you go to or what the sport is, it's all about fun, having fun, and the kids needing to have it. And they stay as part of it. And why do they drop out? Lack of fun, a feeling of inadequacy. And so in this piece of research here, I've highlighted in red, all of these are things that the coach actually affects. Lack of fun, failure to learn new skills, too much pressure, coach is a poor teacher, coach played favourites, and so on. So it's all about the coach. The coach actually sets the tone. The coach decides how much fun there's going to be. Bryce Kavanagh was the Munster strength and conditioning coach, or head of strength and conditioning, and I was asking him about, when you're looking for staff, what do you look for? And he says, well, qualifications are important, but the most important thing is, are they a good bloke? The whole idea that if they're a good person, they'll interact well with the players. If they interact well with the players, they are going to make progress. So it's really golden. Your people skills are the goal, that they are the most important thing. McDonald's have it right. The way that they provide toys for the kids, they set the tone. They create an environment where the kids want to go back to it. It's fun. It's colourful. It's warm. The way that they've gone about their success didn't just happen by accident. And what culture, what environment do you as a coach have for your team, or does your club have? Could you have a club that has an environment that the kids just love going there all the time, and that they continue it as a lifelong thing, that from a young age right up to in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, that they still feel a lot of passion for the club. We all want knowledge, and I don't underestimate the power of courses, education, and continuing to put that education into practice. Continuous professional development, varied experience, observation, they're so important, and there's so much skills that are transferable between sports. But to look, I'm just finishing things now. The key things are really, in my opinion, getting to know your players, being passionate about what you're doing. John Hattie, with his research in his millions of kids that were done in this piece of research, the most powerful thing regarding education in schools was a passionate teacher. Better than small class sizes. It was better than resources, facilities, a passionate teacher. Most student gains were gained from a passionate teacher who cared, had control, conferred, consolidated work that was being done, clarified things, captivated the kids, and challenged the actual kids. So I'd like to thank everybody for the opportunity for given to me to make this presentation. Jimmy, thank you very much, and Nicholas, thanks for the invitation. Just to finish, I'd like to just highlight the importance of our relationships with the players, how important they are to allow us to have, I suppose, a productive, positive situation whereby our team improves together. That's the way forward, in my opinion. Thank you very much for your time, and I welcome any questions.
Jason, thanks very much. Great insight into your role, and also your knowledge in depth, not just with Gaelic sports, but also with other sports right throughout the world, including soccer as well. In terms of learning, that's fantastic. And as a coach of a senior team back home in Ireland, you really take the knowledge from what you've learned over the years to really put it into practice. Jason, I have a few questions floating in, and guys, feel free to type into the box. I know some people have already typed in some questions. We'll take about 5 or 6 minutes of questions, and then we will wrap things up from there. So first of all, Jason, I had a question in. You mentioned Niall Moynihan in your presentation, and this was a question early on. Do you think Go Games has or can improve team play at youth level?
Well, I believe, if we want to improve, we obviously do want to improve the games. An element that is missing at a young age sometimes can be the amount of mastery of skills. So Go Games promotes increased touches of the ball, whether it's in hurling or Gaelic football. If it's going to increase the amount of touches on a ball or with the ball, it's going to help us in our skill mastery. In addition to that, with Go games, they're played in a more positive manner than maybe games would have been played in the past, where you had your leagues and your competitions and your cups. So the team that wins, it's all well and good, they're delighted with themselves. But for the other teams that maybe didn't win, they don't have that positive kind of experience. So I think it's Go games are brilliant. I think games are the way forward. It's very easy for us to set up a simple drill with cones and run out to the first one and hand pass it to the guy at the other side. But we have to use our imagination so much more when we want to play games. We have to think about it more. When I started coaching at Intercounty first, I thought it was all about drills and practices, and I remember Pat Moore is a coach in Waterford, a well-known Intercounty referee, and I would have spoken to Pat and I said, Pat, do you have any advice for me regarding drills? And he said, I do. Get a pen and get a piece of paper, sit down and start writing and drawing. And that's probably the best advice I ever got. And at the time, I thought, like, what is this guy saying? But in hindsight now, it's so important to use games and to modify them in the way you want them to go. But I think Go games is definitely the way forward.
Okay. Next question is, in light of what you've been saying, Jason, do coaches generally neglect, are they neglectful that we've got some visual learners, that some of our players are visual learners?
Yeah, undoubtedly. We would have done VAR testing with all of our players last year, and it was a bit of an eye-opener. We had some guys that, visual learning didn't help them, and that they had to be doing. They were kinesthetic learners, and they had to be in it. They had to feel it, smell it, touch it. They had to be really involved in the activity for them to really understand the message that we're trying to get across. But so many kids now are learning through TV, through iPads, tablets, smartphones. So much information in school now is being done in that manner that us as coaches, we need to move with the times, and we need to be imparting information onto the players through that medium as well. And at inter-county level, some teams have taken it to a whole new level and budgets dictated, but I do think there is ways for clubs and underage teams to figure out ways of using technology to benefit the kids. So they need to be shown things. They need to be shown good practice, and they also need to be shown mistakes. Talking to somebody about a mistake that they made. If a kid realised it was a mistake in the first place, they wouldn't have done it. So if you say to them they just made a mistake, in a lot of cases they don't even realise it actually happened.
Yeah. Okay. How do you deal with a situation where a player comes back to you with a yeah or a but?
How do I deal with it, and how Joe Hoy would have advised me are sometimes a little bit different. Joe's advice to me initially was, if there's a but, straight away to say, can you just tell me what I've just said? Can you repeat what I've just said to you? But I've become less abrasive with the buts and the yeahs. It's more a case of that allows me to be aware that the player is a little bit skeptical about what it is that I'm saying, and I have to be really, really crystal clear as to what the message I want to give them, and I have to be absolutely 100% accurate in what I'm saying. So if I'm in any way vague, or if anything that I'm saying is any way subjective, then I'm in bother. So my phrases or my comments to those players have to be as objective as humanly possible. And that's where stats and analysis.
Jason, would you ever explain to the players that you have met Keith Barry, and would you explain to them that this is what I have learned over the time, that the yeahs and the but are a no-no in my terms, in terms of my coaching and stuff like that? Have you ever brought that to the attention of your players?
With some of them, a lot of the time I kind of feel that coaching is not about the coach, it's about the players. So if I'm constantly maybe saying to them, I did this and I did that and I did the other, it's about me, as opposed to my job really is to impart, facilitate in any way that I can improve performance with the players. And sometimes I'll talk about it, but it's bizarre when I introduce another coach, and if I say this guy used to work with, or this guy did this, sometimes it gives them so much extra credibility amongst the players. But the most important thing, I would learn at Wexford that, I got involved with Wexford. It was the first team that I ever managed, and you start and you just work, and you hope that the work you do, that the players will see that, and that will give them the respect to listen to or believe in what you're actually trying to do with them.
Okay. Jason, I'll take a few more questions. I have a few floating in here. How would you suggest is the best way to build a quick rapport with a team that you've just taken over for the first time?
I'll give an example, I suppose, of my first time at Wexford. I played National League with Waterford against Wexford in the first National League game in 2007, and later on that calendar year I was managing Wexford. So, I looked up to players like Matty Ford and PJ Banville and these guys and thought, my God, they're serious players. And all of a sudden I was supposed to be managing them, and I was quite daunted by it. I was very nervous, and I was scared about meeting them as a group. So instead of meeting them as a group, I met them individually beforehand, and I timetabled it over a number of days that I met every player, got to know them as individuals a little bit about them. So it meant that when I met them collectively, I wasn't as daunted by them, number one, and number two, I felt much more comfortable with faces, names, and a little bit about their personalities, and that gave me huge confidence going in to meet them. And it was, I think the feedback I would have got from them is that I gave up my time to meet them individually, and they appreciated the fact that I sat down and asked them about their personal lives and about their jobs and so on and so on, and that definitely made a big difference. Simple, very, very simple, but I think it's very effective.
Okay. Good. We just take two more, guys, and what we'll do regarding the rest of the questions, if anyone else have further questions, we'll email them in to either myself at sportswebinars@gmail.com or to Jimmy Darcy, and we'll get them to Jason, and we'll send out the answers via text or on an email, I should say. Just the last two, Jason. What methods do you use to ensure that players share the same picture or plan that's in your head?
Yeah, well, I definitely failed on that one at different stages. I don't think I've found anything that has got all the players to share. When you win a game, it's as if everybody's singing off the same hymn sheet. And then when you lose a game, it's as if, do you have a clue what you're at, as a coach or a manager? Do you have any tactics? Do you really know what you're doing? So it's very, very difficult. In 2008, with Wexford, we would have been successful and won a lot of games, but we would have felt the following year our tactics were better, we were better set up. Yet through the O'Byrne Cup, National League, and through the Championship, we won one game all year. We didn't win a game in the National League, didn't win a game in the O'Byrne Cup, and we felt we were better set up. So it's more a case of that as soon as you think you have it cracked, as soon as you think everybody's got the message, you're in bother. So we would use video clips, phone calls, face-to-face meetings, flip chart meetings, we do walkthroughs, we do jog-throughs, we'll show positive clips of how things worked, and when they work, show clips when they're not working. So we try to hit in as many different ways as we can, but definitely, each year there's certain games that have come back after them and I've realised that, yeah, we didn't get the message across correct for that game. We didn't get the message across. So the fault is not the players, the fault is the coaches, the fault is the management. And so often it's our fault as coaches and managers when players don't perform. It's very easy maybe to say, look, the players need to take ownership. Yeah, of course they do, but we've got to put something in place that can get that message to them. So if we do have some sort of if you have a website that you're able to put up video clips, or if you have a Facebook page that you're putting clips and messages up on or whatnot, once you have them up there, it's up to the player to look at them, but you have to maybe explain to the players why it's important to look at it. And so often, if you show a video clip to a team, and if it's an open game, the goalkeepers look at kickouts, the full back line look at tackles by the full back line that's on the video, the midfielders only look at kickouts, and the forwards only look at forward play. They don't look at things in other positions. So there's an element of educating the players. What do you want them to look at? What are the important areas? And that comes back to the KPIs, Nick, that I suppose, what is the philosophy of the team? How do you want them to play? What are the important aspects? And then when you are giving teaching points out or coaching points out, that they are addressed directly at the areas that you really want to improve, rather than just generic terms being thrown at the players. That, talk is cheap, but you can bombard players with too much talk. You need to make it efficient in what you're actually saying.
Yeah, very good. Okay, last question is more an example. Last thing, how to address fear of failure in a team? Just give one example, Jason, if you have it, to address fear of failure in a team.
Highlighting strengths. That I suppose fear of failure is a negative. So if you dwell it all on negatives and they dominate our mindset, People would, say, you're thinking about the game too much, and it's certainly when I was playing, and with certain players I've dealt with since I stopped playing, that they think about their own performance, but they think about what will I do if, and what will I do if, but usually the ifs are if they make a mistake, if they give the ball away, if their man is faster than they are, if the man is winning the ball in the air and they can't deal with it. And the point I make is that I don't believe you can think about a game too much, as long as you're looking at the positive side of it. That if you're thinking about positives, there's no room for negatives. But as soon as a negative comes into it, it can just totally dominate. It's like a demon. It just takes over our mind, and you can't address it. So to deal with fear of failure, just can't allow it to even come into the mind. You've got to think about the process of making things work. What am I good at? Why am I good at it? And just thinking about being good at that and focusing on the strengths rather than the weaknesses. You spend too much time thinking about the weaknesses, you're in trouble. The stories about Mick O'Dwyer, how, throughout his time managing various teams, the Kildare lads still say it, that he never gave a team talk about the opposition. He never spoke about the opposition. It was all about Kildare, 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 Kildare. And I'm sure he had the same traits with Wicklow and Laois, and with Clare when he was over there, and with the Kerry boys, that it was all about you, yourself, what you're good at, rather than looking at the negatives. That an element of constructive criticism, improving those, you can deal with that in training, but the key thing is in training sessions, in meetings and talks, and in dealings with players, that you focus on the positives. A bit of the sandwich technique can improve. Give a positive, get the message and the constructive criticism in, and then get in another positive. And at least the players getting a positive and they're open-minded and they're finishing with a positive and going away from it, but you got that little small message in. But regarding the fear of failure, it's just down to belief, and really, really, really highlighting the importance of focusing on what are we good at, and let's keep doing that.
Very good. Jason, thanks very much. Guys, once again, that was great. Just went over a little bit of time there, but that's fine. Just a couple of little points. We're on live Saturday morning with Paddy Butler at 10 a.m. Irish time. If you haven't registered with Jimmy and want to get online, just send Jimmy a bit of an email tomorrow, whenever it is, and we'll get you registered and get you on. Jimmy Darcy will be putting everything live up on the learning.ga.ie site. If you want to follow us on Twitter, follow us at Sports Webinars, and also follow the GA Learning platform at GA Learning. Guys, thanks. If anyone has any further questions, please email us, and we'll get the questions directly to Jason, and he will hopefully answer them via email for us at that time. Once again, thanks guys, and we will chat to you soon. Thank you.